like to welcome everybody here. We're here to enjoy, look at, appreciate, and learn to understand better the artwork of Christopher Cobb. And we're lucky to do that with the artist here. And that's one of the things that we try to do with these artist receptions and talks here at Pasadena Community College is have an opportunity to meet the artist. So often, if you go to an art venue, you have a wonderful experience looking at the art on the wall, but there's no one to maybe ask if you have some questions. And so by bringing the artist here, we have an opportunity to learn more about the process and all kinds of things. How the art is made, why the art is made, what kind of technical issues that the artist has, how much work they put into this, all kinds of things, any kind of question. So please, as we are here and listening to Chris tell us something about his work, think of some questions that you might have. I mean, I think this is all thought-provoking work, and I think it's all rather curious, and so I think it invites a lot of questions. He also has expressed to me that he enjoys it when people ask him some things. But I'll start by way of introduction, just by saying I've known Chris, I think, for about 10 or 12 years. I think that's about. I'm trying to think back when the Kirk Avenue scene was a little more happening.
Yeah.
And in that time, I've seen Chris go through, I think, what I counted about 3 major bodies of work. The first was kind of text-based, word-based stuff, and it was very funny, very irreverent and interesting and thought-provoking. And then I think that the show that you had at Fleet of Rings was rather political. You had kind of more of a political bent to it. But then emerging out of that started to become this more universalized language that is more enigmatic, less sort of the text-based, word-based art was sort of very almost self-explanatory.
Yeah, very obvious.
Right there, it is a word, and then it's the treatment of the word. So these invite a little more head-scratching, a bit more introspection, and I think by making them in this way that they're so more universal because they're more open to the interpretations that other people bring to them rather than, although I really like the word stuff too, the word stuff was great. But so anyway, so in all that time I had become acquainted with Chris and with his work, and he recently had another show in Roanoke that I really thought was intriguing, and I asked him to bring some of that work here, and he made new work, I think, between now and then, between that time and now. And so I think that's all I really want to say by way of introduction, and just ask you to welcome Christopher Cobb to come here and give us some talks.
I don't really like preparing things to say because my brain kind of goes off the rails 100% of the time anyway. So I'll give you a brief how and why I came to this body of work, and I will invite people to ask questions. I prefer doing it that way. I'd rather talk to you about the things you want to know than read off my CV and artist statement and tell you how cool I am and all that crap. So we're just going to avoid that. When I was a kid, I spent a lot of time in the creek behind our house, a lot of time in the woods in the neighborhood, and I always picked up interesting pieces of wood and rocks, and there was no purpose behind it then, at least I didn't realize it then. But I would find things like this and just stare at it for 20 minutes, wondering what that tree used to look like, wondering how it got into the place that it was, how long it had been there, and I gave a lot of thought to that stuff as a kid. So through my metamorphosis and using glitter, I found myself going back to what I knew, and that was really studying why I found interest in these things when I was a kid. On first glance, people walk by that and you think nothing of it because you see it every single day. But I like using this piece as an example. When I found it, it was pouring down rain, so this was wet. It was completely wet, and it had a completely different look to it than when it dried out. And with it being wet, the idea of finishing it to look shiny came about, and then obviously the touch of glitter. Now, where I came with glitter is when I lived in Florida, I used to make Day of the Dead figurines and little knickknacks to sell at markets and stuff. And it was really just a way to make ends meet and have a little side hustle away from my normal job. And like Jerry said, I had started a series of typography pieces, and they were very irreverent. But looking at a few cuss words done in glitter, it kind of takes the sting out of it and takes the ultimate meaning out of it. You can't look at it and take it seriously, and that was my point, was to use the contrast of things we know as being irreverent and using glitter to soften it and make it something that it's not. So I try to do everything in here, including hardware, was either found or given to me. I didn't pay for anything for this exhibition except for the cost of glitter, because you can't find that on the street. It's my favorite thing to do. I'll spend hours and hours and hours still to this day tromping through the woods, walking down by the creek by my studio, and coming up with some really good pieces. And I've got hordes of it laying around between the house and the studio, sometimes in the back of the car for months on end. That's Sarah can attest. That's really about it. That gives you the basis from where it came from. And I'd like to know your thoughts on it and maybe answer some questions.
Well, I have a question about, there's glitter in this glitter. I mean, there's a density of, just so this is a technical matter, there's just a density of color and then sharpness of, like in this piece behind you where you have that sharp patterns, that just, it suggests a technique that I don't really quite understand, how you're applying it and achieving that density and that color saturation that you're getting.
That technique is something that you guys will probably learn after you get out of school, and it's called patience. If any of you have ever worked with glitter as a kid, or maybe even as an adult, it's very temperamental, and it doesn't always do what you tell it to do. So through a series of figuring out the best adhesives, Elmer's glue didn't work as well as I'd want it to, because it shrinks and contracts a lot, and I couldn't get a proper ratio of glue to glitter to give it that very dense look. So what I ultimately ended up doing was trying 2 or 3 different quick glues that do not expand and contract as much as a light glue does. And consistent layering. I treat the glue as I would treat acrylic paint on a flat canvas. Consistent layering of the glue. And then once I finally do put the glitter down, any edges that are not filled or they just don't feel right to me, I'll actually dig that out and then go back and kind of smooth edges and clean it up a little bit. The one you were talking about, Sarah actually helped me do this one. And I treat this kind of stuff as I would any other painting that you do a sketch of first and then go back over it. So all of this red was put in first, and you put the glue down, then the glitter, and then I take a very small straight edge and just go around the edges of everything and sharpen up the lines and crisp it up. Let it dry and let whatever's hanging over the edges, I knock it off so everything is nice and sharp. And then you go back in and put the second layer in.
So you're able to, you're putting what's the background color on top and then shaking it off. So you're putting pieces around the red afterwards and then applying glitter and then dumping it off to keep that dry.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
One thing I think is really fascinating, I think something I think is really interesting when you meet artists, you talk to artists, especially in this is a good situation or a good example of that. is that it's always fascinating to me when artists have kind of invented their own way of working, and it becomes like the way that they work. I mean, there's a lot of artists that get kind of one that stands in my mind is Will McCooning. Has a way of painting. No one paints like him. He developed his own language of how to work. And I think that with a lot of intensive work and a lot of years of practice, a lot of artists develop idiosyncratic, not just vocabulary, but like a whole way of working. It's just really kind of interesting to hear you describe.
Yeah.
Anybody I got a ton of questions, but I don't want to ask them all. Come on, so somebody else has a question.
Yeah, I've seen you guys look at. I mean, there's obviously something on your head.
It's pretty clear by the state, but that one piece where there's the largest one, how does that sit with the rest of the tubes? I don't see.
So you're talking about the brushes?
Right, yeah.
Glitter seems to be a consistent theme in my work, but it's not always a necessary theme. It's easy to look at my work in this body and just think that, oh, that's all he does is work in glitter. Really, glitter is just another layer to what the true message I think I'm trying to convey is. It could be paint, it could be anything in the glitter's place, and it would still, to me, tell the same story. Now, to answer your question, it's going back to the fact that everything in this room I either found or acquired through not having purchased things. Those are actually street sweeper brushes off of the big street sweepers that clean up the neighborhoods and stuff. And there was a box of them laying on the side of the highway, just spilled out. And were you with me when I got them? It was on my way back from a trip out of town, and I had passed by these things 2 or 3 times. Every time we drove past, I saw them and I wanted them. So I eventually got them, and there you have it.
Yeah, but as you pointed out, Omar, you referenced the statement, and I think that one of the underlying, and I think that it does tie, one of the ways to tie it in, is that there is something, a common thread throughout of finding something beautiful in an unexpected place, or especially in amongst a kind of a weathered, discarded thing, like a discarded thing. While it's in the box by the side of the road, it's a discarded thing. But rearranging it into a kind of, it almost looks like a sort of aurora that you have around a religious figure, like a mandorla or something, that would be around something like that. That's where, it becomes transformed from being a discarded, beat up, worthless thing and found new worth.
Yeah.
I think that's part of what I think that the glitter reinvigorates these discarded objects, but sometimes just the representation presented in a new way has done it. So I think there is. I think that that's. It's a very good question, and I think that. I think it's interesting. I think it's a good question, partly because it's interesting to think about why things are related, and I think that's. I find the thread there. That's what I find.
Yeah.
I have a question. I know these found things are repurposed into art, which is a purpose in itself. But have you ever done any repurposed for other functions? I think I have that.
Or more of a functional thing. Like
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. I have a nice piece of barn rafters, and then I found like a thing that breaks up the ground. I thought about taking the prongs apart and putting them on this and making a coat rack out of it.
Absolutely.
Do you ever do anything like
I
that?
I do. And
Repurposed art, or repurposed items.
yeah, I used to do more of that stuff several years ago when I really hadn't found the professional avenue I wanted to go down as an artist. I'm very careful about making those kinds of improvements items as an artist, for various reasons. One being pricing a coat rack made out of old pipe organs that I made once versus pricing something that's hanging in a gallery. And you walk a very fine line of which direction is right. You know, is this $200 coat rack that I made of less importance because it's cheaper than this $800 or $1,200 piece of art I have? Same amount of time was put into it. The setting is different for the finished product, you know, so.
It still has a creative process.
Absolutely. One's no different than the other. It's all about the setting and where it is and the audience that it's trying to reach. Somebody walking into Black Dog to buy that coat rack may not be the same kind of person that would walk in here and look at an exhibition, and vice versa. So, but as a professional artist, I've started backing away from retail items for that reason. Because I've had people say, well, I saw your this and that at this and such store for this amount of money. Why is that so expensive? And I don't have a good answer for you. I really don't. I don't think any artist can truly answer that in a way that would satisfy everybody in the room.
Here's one somebody once told me one time. Is one of the elements that should go into pricing your work is how much money will it take so that you'll be happy that you'll never see that thing again.
Right.
So, you know, it takes more money to never see this than it would to, you know, I don't mind not seeing that again, you can have it.
Yeah.
But this, I don't want to part with it.
Yeah.
I'm going to really try it out of my hands.
Yeah, and that takes me to that's a good segue into where I'm at these days. Back when I was doing the typographical stuff, I was ready to sell all that stuff before I ever had concept of it. You know, before I ever laid out the first line and put down the first piece of glitter, I wanted that gone, I wanted money in my pocket, and that was that. But as I mature as an artist and I'm starting to find, and I think I've got a pretty good grasp on what I enjoy doing and what defines me the most, I get sad when things go away. I no longer am as interested in having a little price sticker right here sticking below each one of them or a price list somewhere, because I'm attached to all these things. Every piece in this room I'm attached to in some way. And every one of them have meaning to me in some way. Whereas before it was novelty. Yeah. Before it was novelty and seeing what I could get away with. And now it's about developing, it simplifies it by saying as an artist, as a human, as a person, this is me developing my conscience to the world for all of you guys to see. So it is personal to me. And if all of this stuff came back to my house right now, I wouldn't bat an eyelash. I would be happy to have it all.
That was different. I noticed another exhibit where they had this type of work. What bothered me was here they would have new screws and stuff. And I like the way you kept the uniformity of the warrants.
Yeah.
Their work had new screws and new handles and stuff. And, I mean, the glitter's fine.
Like sometimes it's unavoidable. Like I'm not going to find a box of 100-year-old rivets and expect it to fit a modern rivet gun. But screws, nails, I have boxes and boxes and boxes, and I call them my old man jars because I buy them from yard sales and people's garages and just full of rusty screws, mostly flathead. I try to avoid Phillips head screws because they're not new, they're not old. They're from our generation.
You had a question?
I do. You say you found most of your stuff by walking through the woods, and you look at each one and think about where, you know, how it got to in the position it's in now, what that tree ever went through and all that. You have some exhibits with the dog parts and stuff like that, and I would assume you found those in the woods too, judging by the condition that they were in. What was your thoughts about using the dog parts? Because I took pictures of this exhibit several weeks ago to show her, because she comes to all these. And her thoughts was some of these exhibits kind of reminded her of the Island of the Dolls in Mexico. And I was just wondering what your thoughts were about the use of the dolls in your artwork.
To be frank with you, I hate using dolls. It seems like a very elementary thing to do as a contemporary artist, to use doll parts because everybody and their grandmother has used doll parts. But for some reason, I keep acquiring these dolls. I don't seek them out. I don't find these in the woods. I think I did one piece that had a like old ceramic doll leg in it with a chain on it, and it was encased in wax. And people just thought I liked working with dolls, so I ended up with like big storage totes full of old dolls. And I've actually got one, because I went through my shop last week and condensed everything, and I have a big tote of doll parts that I'm ready to ship out to the Goodwill. Because I really, if I never used another doll part again, it wouldn't hurt my feelings at all. Sometimes it just suits the piece, and if I have one laying around, I'll treat it no different than I treat that old car mirror that's on that piece. It's just another thing that fit just right in that spot.
But that's a pretty interesting. Well, that's interesting to hear you say that because they don't because they are little people, and so now quite fine. I mean, you just see them as, if you do just see them just as an object or different than another object, but they are like little people. So people are viewers are gonna look at them and see a whole nother level of content than when they look at, a steak.
Yeah, I mean, like these two, especially, those are obviously there for a reason. That wasn't a doll that just happened to fit in between those nails. That entire piece is built around that doll.
Right.
But I didn't set out to make a piece of art with a doll. The block of wood was there, the doll was there, the nails were there, I was in a mood, there it is. That's how it happens. I'm very emotionally driven in creating art. None of this stuff was sketched out, planned, thought of ahead of time. I'll walk into my studio, I'll hone in on one piece that's laying around, a piece of something like that that's laying around, and I'll just start working on it. I have no plan, no ultimate goal. It's done when I feel like it's done, and that's how it goes.
And do you have multiple pieces going at the same time?
Oh, always. I'm not one of those people that can sit down and make one from start to finish over a week's time. I've got 15 different things going on in my studio at all times. I work on 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there, let the glue dry over here, let the paint dry over there, that kind of stuff.
So one thing that he mentioned is that with this sort of medium, you are able to make a more universal message that someone else can identify with without having the same situation. And for me, when I look at these, I look at something like this wood and see how rotten it is in the middle. And from that rotten end, that I guess useless place, you made something beautiful.
Absolutely.
And at least for me, I look at that, and it shows me, or reminds me, that I can find some of the most beautiful parts of myself and some of the most painful areas of my life. Right?
Yeah, you got it. These pieces to me, all the wood and glitter ones, represent exactly what you were saying, and if you read the artist statement on the wall, it conveys that same message. This piece specifically was out in front of our house for when we moved in there until I decided to use it. Out in the weather, the inside of it was all mushy and wet and gross. And when I started this series, I looked around our property first to see what was available, and that piece, it was stunning. And the more I carved out, the harder the wood was getting, so I knew that it was going to be a structure that would hold up over time. And I like contrast a lot. If you haven't gathered by the show is called Vanities and Profanities. It was the cuss words and glitter. But this is an even deeper contrast to me, because what you see on the outside of these is just scaly and dry and weathered, and there's a story behind it. But then on the inside of all of that is something beautiful and lasting and more powerful than that. But one can't hold the other without the other one's presence. They both need to be there. If I just had 3/4 inch plywood panels covered in glitter and nothing else, you'd be like, okay, great, you put glitter on a piece of wood. But this is different. This one is paper thin, and I almost had problems getting it from the woods to my house. I mean, you could snap it like a wet toothpick. And I like showing that versus the glitter, because I think it tells a really powerful message. It's cheesy to say it, but it's not what's on the outside kind of thing. You know, just in layman's terms, that's what all of this represents.
That's a great metaphor, because it's the rock that provides the place for the glitter to go. So unless it decays, unless it goes through the experiences that it went through, there wouldn't be a place for that shine to be.
Absolutely. Those pieces are me. They're more than anything else in this room. Some of this other stuff is art for art's sake. I mean, it is great stuff, but this stuff is a true representation of how I view myself.
So what about things have? Remember we talking about the thread that ties everything together. But what is that thread for you? What's that person to you?
I'm an extremely aware person visually. I've been called Hawkeyes a couple of times because I can see stuff on the side of the road or in the middle of the road that nobody. I found 2 wallets in one day in the middle of the road. I find people's cell phones. I can spot an owl in a tree driving 80 miles an hour down the road. I think that's a lot of it. I could give you an academic reason or answer, but it wouldn't be true. I think the biggest thing is my ability to collect things that are visually appealing to me and hope that they're visually appealing to you as well after I present them. And if you would have seen that box of that stuff going down the road, you'd be like, oh, there's a box of street sweeper brushes. But you put them together in a different way, it becomes something completely different. And nobody knows what those are until I tell them, and then it becomes very obvious what they are.
Let me encourage some more questions.
I was looking at the nails that are sticking in this. Are they completely random, or did you have a melody in mind?
They're not random. I don't have a way to tell you or describe to you why they're in that order, but the height of them and the number of them is very significant.
Okay.
It'd take me an hour to explain it.
Okay.
And it's one of those things I do that nobody else, and I really don't talk about it. I'm really into numerology and numbers, so numbers are important. And if you notice, things are in uneven numbers, 5, 9, 3. That's just kind of one of my.
Okay.
And what if you look at if you find Chris on Instagram, your newest drawings are also sacred geometry.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, yeah, that's something that I've been very interested in for a long time. So I recognize what you're up to there.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting number-based thing.
Yeah.
Let me put you on the spot with something that I know that I don't know all about, but you were very hesitant to include that last sculpture at the end, because you said that it represented something different, and you weren't sure about including it. I was going to say, is there anything you can say about that, about why I think that some people looking at this wall and looking at that group of wood with glitter on it might not say, oh yeah, that one sticks out as not belonging, because it seems to belong to me, and so I find it interesting to know why it doesn't, maybe doesn't belong as strongly to you.
I don't know that I have a good answer for that now. You know, as artists, sometimes the things you say and feel in the moment are just that. They're things you feel in the moment. That piece of wood came out of a pile of firewood, and it was part of chunk this big around that I had
Split.
split out and then carved it down and shaped it and sanded it and finished it.
You feel
I'm not in love with it.
maybe
And it has nothing to do with the composition or, I don't have an answer.
it's quite a nice piece. I wonder, I wondered if maybe you felt you did too much to it.
I think that's what it is.
Yeah,
Like
I
you-
was
you
just
shaped
about
it.
to agree with him.
But when nature did a lot of this stuff,
Yeah.
and you did that.
Well, part of what Jerry asked me about the show that prompted this exhibition, there were a lot of pieces like that were finished. They were, sanded and finished like furniture. Like I took great care in making them like that. And it's not my favorite thing to do. I don't know what it is about that piece.
No,
There's
no,
just
I
something.
think
There's
you're
something
right.
about it that I'm glad it's sitting down here on the end.
I think you articulated it well. I mean, and as Richard said, I mean, it's that, that for most of the other pieces, it was the natural course of time that shaped it into the shape that it's in. And,
Yeah.
and maybe, you feel, and so I think it's a very valid reason to think of it as separate. It might be a whole different other body of work. It might just be different.
Yeah, and I have experimented with that. I've done a couple of pieces of carved, shaped, and finished wood that are more fine art than they are contemporary art. But I think that's for another time. I think that's when I'm an old man sitting on the porch, whittling away at wood. I think that will be where I can be in some little local members gallery somewhere for the rest of my life. And
I get it. I think
Yeah.
I think that's valid.
yeah,
Distinction.
yeah.
Anybody else? Got some thoughts? Well, if not, then I would encourage you to hang around for a little while, continue to snack, and maybe you have some questions that you prefer to ask, not so publicly. You can ask Chris. But while he's here, take advantage of the fact that you have an opportunity to interact with the artist and learn more about their artwork, their practice. And join me in thanking Chris very much for coming and sharing.